We've learned one thing about Boris in the last few years. Underestimate him at your peril, Dan. This is a guy that succeeded in London, which is a Labour-dominated city, twice as London mayor. Tories just don't win in London. He did the double. You obviously have his instrumental role in Brexit. The fact that he decided to support Brexit meant that I think, that was the tipping point in which many voters took the idea of leaving the European Union seriously. After that, he wins the election, the landslide, as you mentioned, against the odds. And then, of course, he got Brexit done. There was the furlough scheme, which has been a world-class solution for those being forced to stay at home in the course of the pandemic. Now, you and I would argue that it oughtn't to have been necessary because healthy people should have been able to go to work and continue life as usual and protect the vulnerable. But if, Dan, you're going to lock people up, you need something like the furlough scheme. It absolutely worked. And now he's nailing it with the pandemic because ultimately England is an outlier within the United Kingdom. And you and I, we love our viewers, GBNews, we love this United Kingdom. But unfortunately, a lot of shame has fallen upon the leadership in Scotland and Wales in particular. They've pursued awful ideas like vaccine passports, which create the idea of sort of certain public services and rights being predicated on your medical status, which has damaged hospitality and divided society. England haven't done that because, of course, the Prime Minister has jurisdiction in England. And now England is basically Sweden Mark II. Even the Germans today, I was reading in Die Welt, which is a national newspaper in Germany, that they're envious of how England are doing. And they're speculating, Dan, that it was Freedom Day. That on the 19th of July, when the Prime Minister stood his ground, which the leader of the opposition said was reckless, many sage scientists as well, and of course most of the media, well, he did it. So look, Boris is not perfect. There's a perception that Carrie, his wife, is running the country. He's pursuing an unaffordable, scientifically unproven green agenda. With other countries like India and China not pulling their weight. There's the migrant crisis, which you've brilliantly pointed out this week on your show, is a total emergency and now a human tragedy, a cost of living crisis. But I've got faith in this guy because he's done it before and he'll do it again.
Look, Mark, I genuinely hope you're right. And I feel like I need to clear that up, actually, because very often people say you're being too harsh on Boris Johnson. And actually, I was a Boris Johnson supporter. I backed him becoming Tory party leader when very, very few people in the media did. I backed him to win the election because I knew he was the only person who was going to be able to deliver Brexit, and he succeeded on that front. But, Mark, I am a bit worried. I'm not going to lie. I'm not worried about his mental capacity or anything like that. It's nothing to do with the fact that he's lost his place in a speech. No. It's about whether he can actually deliver controversial policies that are important to the future of this nation. And Mark, you just mentioned it. I've written a new column about this for the Mail Online tonight. I really worry that if he does not stop the boats, Mark, which is something that his government promised to do 2 years ago, this is now a national emergency, in my opinion, that could put his job under threat.
Well, that's right. And I think he has the powers of persuasion. I think he's got the intellect. I think he's got the ability to knock heads together, which he did in the course of the Brexit negotiations. He was very brave during Brexit. He threw the DUP under the bus because the reality was that by accepting, which of course we all hate, that Northern Ireland protocol, that's what got a deal across the line. We're paying the price now, but I think that Boris Johnson calculated that he would sort of take a bath on that invisible border and solve it further down the line, which I believe is what will happen. So he was playing the long game on that one. And he knows that he will not get re-elected if he doesn't solve this migrant crisis. So he will have to just look at the Home Office, and the support he's got is Priti Patel, the right person to be the Home Secretary. And what I'd like the Prime Minister to be more ruthless. This is a guy that couldn't sack Dominic Cummings. Yeah. Even though he made that ill-fated sight test visit to Barnard Castle.
The problem is, though, it's more fundamental, I believe, than Priti Patel. And I know, and quite rightly, she's going to be criticised, and I've criticised her again tonight. But this is about, as Dominic Cummings put it, the blob, the civil service blob, the Home Office blob. They are the public servants in this country who are fundamentally against Boris's agenda, who don't want to implement policies like offshore processing. And actually, it's going to take some real willpower, some real force of Boris to stand up to the blob. Just like, Mark, I would say, what's happened to clipping the wings of the BBC and standing up to the BBC? So, yes, I want Boris to succeed, but he made a lot of promises to us before that 2019 election, Mark. Yes, on Brexit, he has well and truly delivered. There's a few bumps in the road. There were always going to be, but he will forever be remembered as the man who helped secure the referendum result and then delivered it. And that is his legacy. But, Mark, we need more from him.
We do, and he is everyone's prime minister. The problem with the media is that they characterise Boris Johnson in a certain way as a lazy, bumbling fool. And I spoke to Tom Bower, his biographer, on my programme, and Tom Bower said that he's one of the cleverest politicians in the country. He's extremely shrewd. He's a master tactician, but he has a weak spot, an Achilles heel. He wants to be liked. So he's got to learn in office. It's still his first term. He's been knocked sideways, not just by almost dying from COVID, but dealing with the pandemic. Who would be prime minister over the last 2 years? And frankly, is there a country really in the world outside of perhaps Sweden that's had a good pandemic? I don't think so. So yes, the bottom line is he's got it all to do and he's got a lot to prove, but he needs to succeed. And I think we've got to back him.
Yeah, I do back him. And I fundamentally want him to succeed because that's good for the country. I would also say, Mark, when he's not quite up to scratch or when he's giving in to the blob or he's giving into the mainstream media or giving into the BBC, we have to call him out.
Well, we do, and this is a prime minister. You're right. This is a prime minister that is not willing to go on record and say that only women have a cervix.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to call that out. We have to call that out.
That makes him Keir Starmer Mark II.
I like your defence of Boris Johnson, though, Mark, because it's important. You know, this is a man who's done a lot of good things, and you know no one's ever going to defend him on the BBC or ITV or Sky News.
Look,
so thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.